So anyway, I think that's basically, oh, I was going to introduce the e-learning support. All right, get out of that. There we go. Lightning talks. And here is the e-learning support team, me, Tracy Thomas Wilson, and I'm an academic technologist in CFANS. And we have Honey Vanderventer, who has come to work with us just this last month, and we're very excited to have her. And she's been in CFANS for 10 years doing communications, so you probably already know her. Mary Jetter, who works at the Center for Educational Innovation, and Jane O'Brien, who works at the Center for Educational Innovation, and then Annette McNamara, who comes from the Academic Technology Support Center. And we constitute the CFANS e-learning support team, and we're here to help. Having said that, our first talk is Beth Ventura. Oh, sorry. Yay, Beth, hooray! Yes!
Do I need that? I need both. Okay. Hi, everyone. So this has actually been my first year doing an online class. I hated online classes when I took them as an undergrad, so I've been really cognizant about trying to figure out ways to engage lots of students. And I really wouldn't have been able to do any of this if it hadn't been for the support of the e-learning team. So if you do online classes, I'm just going to make a plug. If you're not already connected and know Tracy and Mary and Annette, et cetera, please do, because they're amazing. And this class would be half as good, if it hadn't been for them. So I teach a class called Animals in Society. It's an intro-level class. It has 200 students. Most of them are not from within the field of animal science and not even from CFANS, so about half to two-thirds maybe are from all over the university. So I've got a lot of students to challenge, to think about kind of the ethics that arise when we talk about animals in society and how we use them in different contexts. So this class, because it's intro and because it meets a learning LE, whatever those are called. Thank you. They meet an LE for civic life and ethics. So I have to get 200 students to think critically about these types of issues in an online context, which is really weird. And so every week, we kind of have a buffet tour through a different animal species that we interact with in society. So farm, lab, research, zoo, et cetera, et cetera. For example, in Cattle Week, we have a number of different learning objectives. And every week, one of the things, in addition to kind of introducing how we deal with these species and how we interact with them and what the industries are structured like, I also try to tap into another theme that maybe hits on some ethical, societal issues. So for this week, my aim is to try to get them to think, I know this is really small, it's a screenshot of the actual Moodle site, but I want to get them to understand and think and assess about the role of rhetoric and how rhetoric shapes debates about agriculture and animal welfare and different issues that might arise. So, in addition to making them do readings and lectures and talk to each other in forums, every week I have them do an activity. And for example, this week's activity was something called the Udder Truth, because I like animal puns. And my students don't, but I do, so that makes me happy. And so there's a few things that kind of I try to structure my activities to hit on. One of the things is that I have them to be like multiple parts, which I think helps kind of repeatedly force engagement through that week. The other things that I do that I think help activities work well is that I tag students to be with just a group of 8 students or so. They only interact and talk with each of those other students throughout the course, which is nice because it builds trust and it helps them kind of feel comfortable being able to talk about challenging issues with these types of topics. And then I also provide an extremely detailed instruction guide where every possible thing is outlined, because if you don't do that, you're going to be super sad and do nothing other than answer emails all day. So, for example, here's a snapshot of this specific document. Now for this week, not only do I want them to be introduced with a couple of different specific issues that arise, for example, with dairy farming, but I also want them to, what else do I want them to do? I also want them to actually start to assess how rhetoric shapes debates about, say, dairy farming. And so because I want them to do 2 things, I jigsaw the learning. So I have students pick one of 3 topics that they want to specifically investigate. They'll share with each other, and then they'll kind of have to learn about all 3 of those things, even though they can choose their own adventure. So, God, what's my time like? I have like 2 seconds. Great. So, for example, one of the things that I have them do for this activity is they first have to watch a certain topic video produced by the dairy industry. For example, debunking whether big farms are bad or whether animal welfare is good or bad on farms. And then, so they hear from an industry voice, and then they hear from a scientist voice. So then they have to read a scientific article. And then what I ask them to do is kind of compare and contrast the messages that are put forth from an industry voice versus a scientific voice, and assess and interact with the alignment or potential contrast between those 2. And then I ask them to determine if those sources were biased or not. So here's some of the comments that we get back from my students, which are basically like, oh, I was really surprised with this alignment. I didn't think it was going to be that good. Or, oh no, I'm really critical about what's happening. And then, I know I have 2 seconds left, what basically ends up happening, don't gong me, is that, no, you're gonna gong me, it's fine. What ends up happening is that I achieve really complex understandings in them, and they start to articulate, wow, things are more complicated than it seems, which in a 200-person class, I'm really pleased with. Thank you.